A decree issued at the final session of the Council of Trent in 1563 ratified the validity of images to narrate the Holy Scriptures. In line with previous councils, it was considered the holy images instructed the illiterate, helped the forgetful to remember, and moved the faithful. However, such images should conform to official written sources, and the bishop was made responsible for their decorum. The edict encouraged theologians to write treatises on sacred images. Clement VIII even instructed Cardinal Gabriele Paleotti to compile an index of prohibited images with a view to establishing censorship, as already occurred with the written word. However, the project was left unfinished due to the prelate's death in 1597. In the Catholic world, the saints were maintained, like Our Lady, as role models and mediating figures whose beneficial intervention should be invoked and thanked. Canonizations, now controlled and approved by papal authority, proliferated after the turn of the 17th century. Moreover, the issue of the saints encouraged documentary historiography to combat the arguments of the Protestant historian Matthias Flacius, who linked the Reformation to the early Christians. Moreover, the issue of the saints encouraged documentary historiography to combat the arguments of the Protestant historian Matthias Flacius, who linked the Reformation to the early Christians. The historian Cesare Baronio and the archaeologist Antonio Bossi studied files and catacombs and published monumental works aimed at establishing the authenticity of the relics of the first martyrs and at legitimizing the primacy of the Roman Church. Meanwhile, the cities sought the bodies of saints in order to make show of their Catholicism. The printing press not only enabled the rigorous editing of keywords, such as the Holy Bible itself, but also allowed innovation in the way ideas and news were communicated, with the hybridization of text and images with the oral tradition. Unlike painting, which only the elites could afford, engravings were printed at low cost. Most of the population was illiterate, and reading aloud, accompanied by illustrative images, was a frequent practice. These forms of communication increased the potential audience for engraved works, including prints, which became very important resources for underpinning and disseminating doctrine. The Reformation movement used printing and engraving in a highly conscious way. For Luther, the printing press was a gift from God. For the first time, its potential was harnessed for mass distribution. Although Luther was opposed to idolatry of images, he appreciated the educational value of art, and artists such as Dürer and Cranach put themselves at the service of spreading his ideas. Moreover, the translation of the Bible, which Luther completed in German in 1534, simulated both printing and literacy. Thanks to the printed word and the image, the Reformation quickly spread into the Netherlands, France, and England, among other regions. In the Catholic territories, the ban on the vernacular Bible led to an increase in the publication of works that combined text and image. The Jesuits, or Company of Jesus, an order strongly committed both to obeying the Pope's authority and to teaching and spreading the doctrine, began to stand out in their use of images in religious books in order to stimulate meditation and as a support for their style of preaching. An example is Evangelicae Historiae Imagines, written by the Jesuit priest Jeroni Nadal. Illustrations also abounded in works of theology, hagiography, mysticism, and holy prayer, as well as in liturgical drama. As concerns the publication of reference text, a particular outstanding example is the Antwerp Polyglot Bible, which followed the model of that published in Alcalá de Henares at the beginning of the century. The religious struggle in pulpits and streets ran parallel to the dissemination of engraved images. This is what has been called the first campaign of pictorial satire. It was vital to get the message across and convince people, and all sides used the image powerfully both to illustrate their own doctrine and their opponent's effects. They all commissioned works with clearly critical content against their enemies, but the Protestant won the battle of the image with the brilliance and clarity of their visual attacks.